Hi, welcome to Shakespeare month 4, I believe, and this month we are looking at Henry IV, Part 1. So by the Part 1 you can tell there's a Part 2 coming, and this is actually part of a group of plays, I believe that they're referred to as the Henriad. So there's Richard II, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and then Henry V. So these are, three successive kings. And before I dive into the plot of this play, I'll just say that to set this up, because we're not doing Richard II first, to set this up, Henry IV, he overthrew Richard II. So when we get to Richard II, that's a play kind of about bad leadership. And Henry IV was, throughout the course of that play, exiled from England. He comes back and overthrows Richard II and becomes the king. And so now this is many decades on. He's older. He's got grown children. He's got a son who's ready to be king. That's up for debate. But there's a lot of history from that time that's referenced in this play. So I just want to set that up. And this play really follows two main plot points. There's Henry IV and what's going on with him militarily and politically, and then there's his son Prince Hal, who is he's kind of a rogue. He's hanging out with lowlifes. He's partying. He's not being responsible, and he's not really living up to his title as prince and future king. So we follow both of them, and then the plot points come together. So I'm going to talk about what's going on with King Henry first, and then we'll go into Prince Hal, and then I'll tell you what I really love about this play. So Henry IV, when we open, he is contemplating, and this is a lot of guys with titles like Earl sitting around talking in a room, so I'll try to be succinct in what's actually going on. So when we open the play, King Henry is contemplating starting a crusade, but he gets news that he's lost a military battle in the south. He's been defeated, or his army's been defeated, so that's a blow to the coffers and putting off the crusade. And then in the north, one of his subjects, Henry Percy, there's a lot of Henrys in this play, Henry Percy, who is referred to as Henry Hotspur. So that's what I'll refer to him as. So Henry Hotspur, he has been victorious in battle, but he has not sent his prisoners to the king. And I think this is a money thing. Sending the prisoners, there's revenue or something attached to that. I think the ransom for the prisoners. So that's seen as lightly treasonous or very suspicious. And so hearing that, King Henry IV sends for Henry Hotspur to explain himself. So we're going back and forth between the king and Prince Hal, but I'm sticking with the king for now. So Henry Hotspur comes, and he is pretty hot-headed, and he tries to get out of, like, oh, I didn't say not to send the prisoners, but they end up getting a little heated, and he reveals that his family, the Percys, were the ones who helped King Henry overthrow Richard II, so they feel like he owes them. And after Hotspur is at court with King Henry, his dad and his uncle are very indignant, and they convince him that they should get some allies together and overthrow him. They're just as deserving of the crown as him. They did everything for King Henry to help him overthrow Richard II. So Henry Hotspur is trying to get together some allies to wage a war for the crown. And as we go through, he gains some support, or his uncle and his father tell him their support, but then when it actually comes down to it, some want to remain neutral, some can't betray the king, and so he realizes that there's not as much support as he was counting on. But since these people who are not going with him now know about his plans, he's got to wage war like soon. Otherwise, they can go back and tell the king, hey, he's planning to overthrow you. So this speeds up the process of him going to war with King Henry. So that's where I'm going to leave that. So now we'll pick up Prince Hal. So we follow him. He's a partier and a vagabond. He's spending his time at seedy taverns, and he's got these low-life friends, and is just, has no responsibility and is just having fun. And that's how we meet him in this play. And his friend, his kind of like closest compatriot that we're following is one of the most famous Shakespeare characters, Sir John Falstaff. And I feel like everybody knows somebody kind of like this. Falstaff he's like a freeloader, he's a liar, he is just a compulsive liar, fabricates these stories, but he's a lot of fun to hang out with, so he's greatly amusing to Prince Hal. And if you are interested in the language of the plays, they have a lot of back and forth, a lot of insults, a lot of, inside jokes that I think a lot of like the best Shakespeare insults come from Falstaff. And some of the things he says are so clever or so silly that I think if you hear it more, it becomes more amusing. I know one of the things he says, you are as fat as butter, and there's a lot of, comparing to weird Renaissance food stuff, and they drink a lot. So we meet Hal and Falstaff, and they're joking around, and then this is a light plot thread, this Prince Hal thread for a start. And then their friend Ned comes in and says, hey, I know there's going to be some wealthy travelers on the road tomorrow. Let's rob them. It'll be fun. And he takes Prince Hal aside and says, we're going to play a prank on him. We won't show up. He'll rob these people, and then we will, in disguise, rob him. And then we'll wait for him to come back to the tavern and wait to hear all the lies he spins about what happened, because he's just going to blow it all out of proportion. So we see this happen. We see Falstaff and his two other vagabond friends rob these travelers, and then we see Prince Hal and Ned rob him in disguise, and then we see them back at the tavern with Falstaff telling this ridiculous, oh, there were 2, oh, there were 20, people that I narrowly escaped with my life. So they hear him tell his wildly fabricated version of what happened for their own amusement. So Prince Hal, he's just amusing himself. He's not doing anything responsible. And during the midst of all this, he gets word, someone finds him in a tavern to tell him, you've got to go to court. You've got to see your father because there's an impending war. So Prince Hal knows, like, oh man, fun's over. I've got to face my father. They have a very tense relationship. And there's a really beautiful scene after this where it's kind of killed the party mood at the tavern. So Falstaff says, oh, well, since you're going to go get yelled at tomorrow, like, let's do a play. Let's put on a play. You play your father and I'll play you. So there's a funny little scene that's played for jokes, for the people in the tavern. And then, let's see. I forget if it's first Hal plays his father and Falstaff plays Hal, and then they switch. Yeah, and then no. Well, anyway, I just watched it. But anyway, they one plays the father, one plays Hal, and then they switch. And in this little play, they're just talking about, oh, I know why you're so disappointing because you're hanging out with this Falstaff character, and they're making jokes about him for the amusement of the crowd. But then there's a really beautiful moment where he says, never, you don't forget Falstaff. And it's kind of a recognition of Prince Hal, he's got to put this chapter behind him and go be responsible. And they have this moment that's really tender that shows how, how much they do have this friendship. And I love these little moments in Shakespeare because they're so recognizable, even if the language doesn't make sense. So Hal goes to his father the next day, and who basically tells him what a disappointment he is, and he tells him, that Henry Hotspur is way more noble than you. And so Hal says, I'll prove myself. I will defeat him in battle. I'll defeat him one-on-one, and I will prove that I am worthy of my birth, of my title, of my nobility. And so then we do go to the battle, and which Falstaff also partakes in, and all the tavern rabble get conscripted, to fight in this battle. And at the beginning, before the battle starts, King Henry tells, the emissary to Henry Hotspur, his uncle, he says, he makes him a generous offer that we don't have to fight, he gives him a very generous offer. And the uncle decides not to take that news to Henry Hotspur because he says if he agrees, he can be forgiven. Henry Hotspur is a young guy. He's like Prince Hal, a young man. But the uncle and the father, they're not going to be forgiven for their treason. So he doesn't tell him about this generous offer. They have the battle, and Hal and Henry Hotspur end up fighting one-on-one, and Prince Hal defeats him. So that does happen. There's a little bit with Falstaff, pretending to fight, and then, putting blood on his face to pretend that he killed someone when he really didn't do anything. So there's a lot of comic relief throughout this whole thing. And then the uncle, the rest of the Percys are, they're going to be put to death after this battle, and then Henry Hotspur has been killed. And it's a beautiful moment when he is defeated, and what Prince Hal says to him, he says, "Farewell, great heart," and he says a really beautiful things about him. It's a lovely moment, and that battle is over, but it's the end of the play, and there's still more battles to unfold in this war. So that will be picked up in part 2, among other things. So that's the basic plot line of this play. And I would like to go into things that have grabbed me, the parts that I really resonate with so far, and as familiar with the play as I am now, and just some fun little things that are in there to look out for. So I really love this Hal storyline because we follow him in this play, and then he becomes Henry V, and this is really just a beautiful arc about coming into your responsibility, coming into your estate, and it's a beautiful journey. He comes really far, even in this play, just from not just really shirking his responsibility to proving himself, and that trajectory keeps going. And there's so in the beginning of the play, when we find Prince Hal just drinking with Falstaff and playing pranks and just really, really, really abdicating all of his responsibility, he has what is currently my favorite monologue in all of Shakespeare, and I won't say it all. I won't say it all now, but I will link a video of just that monologue in the playlist for this play. But it's the monologue that starts, "I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. But herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world. But when he please again to be himself, being wanted he may be more wondered at by shaking off the foul and ugly mists of vapors that had seemed to strangle him." And there's more, but that I love, because he he knows that he has to give this up, but he's almost putting on an act to be this carefree, partying, hanging out with all these kind of, common people. He knows that he can't do that forever, but he's saying that when I know who I am, and when you see me step into my true self, because you've seen this contrast of how I was, everyone will see like how magnificent I truly am, because there's something to compare it to. And I think that's so beautiful. It's that people will really, and it's not just people will really notice him, but it's worth more than if he were just to be the good kid all along. And I think that's such a beautiful metaphor for what, everyone knows, or especially if you're on any kind of, you know, spiritual path, that's the whole key is knowing and then stepping into your true self. And I think there are a lot of people, especially who have inspiring stories, who you hear about someone who, was this hard, convict in jail, and then they get out and they help so many people, and it's that story that really helps them connect to the people they can help. And so I really see that dynamic with Prince Hal, and I love that monologue. It is my favorite, my personal favorite right now. And there's also some really fun Shakespeare, Francis Bacon things in this play. So with all the jokes with Falstaff, there is a point where they're waiting for him to come back from the prank robbery, Ned and Hal. And so to amuse himself, to pass the time, Hal says, "Oh, there's this, this little, what is like a busboy. His name is Francis, and every time you call his name, he says anon, anon, because he's so busy running back and forth that he's like, well, hang on, I'll be right there." So they play a prank on him or not a prank, but so Hal is talking to him, and then he has Ned go around the corner and just every once in a while yell for him. So you get this scene where they're both saying, "Francis, come here," and Francis saying, "Anon, anon." He's saying, "No, no, no, Francis, over here, like I was talking to you." And so what you get is this little scene within a scene where you're hearing the name Francis like 50 times. And that I read, it was either in Peter Dawkins or the Shakespeare Code, that's a joke that Francis Bacon put in there, and I love that. It just, because it's played as almost a broad slapstick comedy, but just knowing that's an inside joke, to put Francis for Francis Bacon's name and have it said so many times, I just love it. This is the stuff that I get really nerdy about as a Francis Bacon advocate. And there's a couple other Francis Bacon things. I didn't check these out, but this just stood out to me when I was watching this production, that there is a part where Henry Hotspur goes to his Welsh cousin Glendower, I think. I wrote it down. And they're kind of arguing. And Glendower is saying all this stuff about, I was born under this, this particular star, and, the heavens were in this, were in this auspicious state when I was born. And to that, it made me think of the prophecy that was the Great Instauration, which was when Francis Bacon wasn't actually born. I think he was 12 when this celestial event happened. That was a prophecy of someone changing the world. And I feel like that could be a reference to that, a Francis Bacon reference to that, because from what I recall, that was a big deal that everyone was talking about, this celestial event that people were, making prophecies, and it was something that everybody, I think, at the time was paying attention to. So I think that is a reference to it, maybe. And then also in this same scene, Hotspur's getting really annoyed with his cousin, and he says, he says, yeah, I get annoyed at him because he's talking of that dreamer Merlin and his prophecies. And I'm like, oh, well, there's Merlin. There's a reference there. So those are just little things that I picked up, which may or may not have been the intention, but that's what I'm getting out of it at that point. So Hal, I'm thinking if there's anything else I want to say about Hal. It is really beautiful. I mean, we'll get more into the father-son relationship in Henry IV Part 2, but you see Henry IV when he's saying, I wish I had a different son. He's such a disappointment. And then when Falstaff and Hal are having that play where they're each pretending to be one or the other, and it's really I don't want to say tender, but it's really poignant because he knows he's a disappointment. Prince Hal, he knows he has to grow up, and there's a sadness to leaving behind his carefree days, his friends who he won't be able to hang out with when he really takes up his place. He's not even a like a consultant. I forget what the time correct, an advisor. He's not even an advisor to the king because he's not there. His little brother is the advisor. He's just not there. And so there's a real, you can see a real wistfulness in this, I'm having fun now, but I know tomorrow I have to go and battle and prove myself and, if I survive it, be responsible and come into my the responsibility of who I really am and live up to that. So I really love that. And we'll see this more in the other plays with Prince Hal when he becomes the king also. But I just think it's a really beautiful journey. And then with Henry IV, you start to see it here, but I mean, he overthrew a king and now he has to worry about people trying to overthrow him, and it's just this cycle of, unease, dis-ease and unrest. And, and the disappointment with his son and that dynamic is really beautiful. So I feel like there are more things I want to talk about, but I can always do another video. So that is that for my thoughts so far on Henry IV Part 1. And the video I recommend, the only one I love, but I didn't find really even a YouTube version that would be subpar, is the BBC's Hollow Crown series. So it is available to watch on Amazon. You can rent it. I'm sure it's probably widely available in a lot of libraries because it was broadcast on the BBC and PBS within the last couple years. PBS, I didn't see it up right now. If you stream things online or if you have a smart TV, you can stream things from PBS. I didn't see it available at the moment, but I don't know when you're watching this video. So if you're watching this video at a later time, it may be something that's actually playing on TV or available from the PBS website. But it's a beautiful, beautiful production with Tom Hiddleston, Jeremy Irons, Simon Russell Beale, David Heyman. There's a lot of really, really wonderful actors in this, and it's done very cinematically, which I think helps get the story across. Although I would watch everything of a Shakespeare Globe production if I could, because I think the language really sticks out more in those. But it's nice to get the story more from a visual, emotional perspective too, I think. Because whatever you grab from it, maybe you have a family dynamic that really resonates with what's going on in this play. Maybe you like the words, maybe you just like the story. It really, if you get anything out of watching these, that's great. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'll get one phrase out of it, or an idea, and that's 0.0001% of all that's there, but it's still useful and it's still entertaining. So I hope you enjoy this play, and we will see you next month for Henry IV Part 2 if we're going in order, which I haven't decided yet, but I think we will for for these anyway. All right, have a good month.